Today on the Bourbon Bytes podcast, 2 whiskey distilleries are giving back to flood victims in Kentucky and Texas. Plus, we do a double-header review of the 2 Michter's Legacy Series releases from 2025, Shenk's Homestead and Bomberger's Declaration. Stay tuned. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Bourbon Bytes podcast. I'm your host, Clifton, and this is the week of Thursday, August 14th, 2025. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode. If you're new here, hi, welcome, good to have you. Make sure to follow if you enjoy the show. Today's going to be a little bit different. I'm going to only feature a couple news stories because I have not just one, but 2 bourbons to review this week. So if you saw the title of this podcast and the image, you already know what we're going to be reviewing. We're going to be reviewing the brand new 2025 releases of Shenk's and Bombergers from the Michter's distillery. Now, I previously gave an update about these releases on a podcast episode a few weeks back. It was the episode on July 3rd. So if you missed that, make sure to go back and tune into that to hear all about these releases. I'll give a little bit of a recap before we get into our review. But today it's all going to be about tasting and comparing these 2 releases and seeing if they are worth the price, because they have gone up significantly since I last bought a pair of them. So stay tuned for that. But first, we have a couple news stories, both of which are actually kind of related. It's kind of similar how these whiskeys are related, but I did want to mention them because they are both for a good cause. So the first of which is coming to us from J. Mattingly 1845 Distillery. They are releasing a bourbon to aid local flood sufferers. So if you remember back in April of this year, there was a flash flood in central Kentucky, particularly affecting the Frankfort, Kentucky area. The Kentucky River rose to near record levels and impacted not just distilleries, but people, their livelihoods, their homes. And this distillery is actually going to give back to the community. Now, fortunately, the J. Mattingly distillery was spared from any damage due to the floods, but they wanted to find a way to give back to their local community. So they decided to release a limited edition bourbon called Frankfort Rising. And $30 of the sale from each bottle went back towards the Franklin County Community Fund to assist families affected by the April floods. Now, the double stave process isn't unique to this release. They've actually done it on a few other releases, but this one is a charred oak stave that is added after the fact to each barrel at just the right moment in aging to coax out extra flavor. Now, this is according to their press release. They say that tasting notes describe this bourbon as having a graham cracker note on the palate, joined by toasted oak and a gentle spice from the rye, with a medium to long finish and lingering baking spice to vanilla and nutty warmth, leaving a satisfying impression. All those flavor notes sound exactly like the perfect bourbon to me. Now, I've not actually had much from J. Mattingly. I think I may have had a sample or 2, so I'm not super familiar with their flavor profile. But I do love a bourbon with a good cause. So this one's actually coming out today, August 14th. This is going to be released at the distillery. It's going to be 112 proof when it comes out. I'm not saying anything about the specific number of bottles here. I do know that this is a limited edition release. Their goal is to raise $10,000 from this bourbon. So doing some quick math, because you guys know I am not the best at figuring these things out. It looks like it's about 333 bottles of this will be available if I'm doing the $30 per bottle to raise at least $10,000. So there's at least 333 bottles of this based on my calculations. Now, looking into the Franklin County Community Fund, I like to do a little bit of research before I recommend giving to an organization. I actually see that this one is really involved in their community, and here's some facts about it. They are a permanently endowed fund at Bluegrass Community Foundation that provides support for civic projects and community needs for years to come. These contributions will go to support the organizations responding to the urgent needs in the community affected by these floods. They just recently awarded $50,000 to the Resource Office for Social Ministries to provide immediate assistance to residents impacted by the flooding. They also set up a multi-agency resource center for those that are affected as well. I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but the bottle's $120 at retail. $30 of that is going straight to the community, which is incredible. So I commend them. Well done. If you guys get a chance to try this, let me know how it is. I mean, I think it's more of the cause than, the actual whiskey itself, but it sounds pretty good. I'm excited to hear how it is. Now, in a very similar news story, so this is a callback to a story I did a few weeks back. I mean, almost over a month ago now. It was the Garrison brothers Guadalupe release, which was, unfortunately timed around the timing of the flooding of the Guadalupe River. But they actually, took that moment and made it into a positive thing by starting the Garrison Brothers Distilleries Guadalupe Relief Day. They raised $100,000 for Texas flood relief through bourbon sales and community support. So another example of a bourbon distillery making a huge impact. They pledged $50 from every bottle of cask strength Guadalupe single barrel that was sold, alongside with profits from the Whiskey Shack and gift shop merchandise to the cause. So it was actually on July 12th was the day that they called the relief day where all this kind of came in. They raised an initial $50,000, which was matched dollar for dollar by Happy State Bank in Fredericksburg. So it brought their total contribution to $100,000. And those funds were delivered to the Community Foundation of the Texas Hill Country's Kerr County Flood Relief Fund. That is a big, long name, but it's definitely dedicated strictly for the relief of that flooding. Similar to how, Kentucky was affected by the flooding in April, Texas was just devastated by those floods. So Garrison Brothers did team up and set up an online donation page back on July 7th, and it got its first $10,000 in donation matched by private donors. So you can actually still donate to this cause if it's something that you want to give back to that community. It's going to be active until October 1st, the donation link on their website. So definitely go check that out. And just looking at the page, I'm seeing a lot of donations from not only individuals, but small businesses in the area. So always love seeing communities support each other and build each other up, especially after, devastation hits the area. So I just want to say huge shout out to those folks for offering an opportunity to give back to the communities that make them who they are and offering a significant portion of your proceeds to a good cause. I think that's really important, not that 1% match thing that a lot of things do, not to say that's anything, not worth mentioning. I appreciate it more than nothing, but seeing that much per bottle be given back is really special. So cheers to those two. All right. Well, like I said, this week is not going to be very news focused because we have 2 reviews to get to on this week's portion of Byte-Sized Reviews. All right. Well, first up of the 2025 Legacy series from Michter's Distillery. Like I said, I covered the announcement of these releases on a podcast a few weeks ago, but now I'm excited that I had a chance to buy them. They popped up on K&L Wine and Spirits website. I did pay full retail price for these, maybe a little bit more. I think combined it was around $300. So the suggested retail on the Shenks is $110, and the suggested retail on the Bombergers is $120. So I paid, maybe 20% more, but I was willing to do it because I knew that I wanted to get my hands on these releases. So we're going to start with the Shenks, which is the lower cost of the releases. Now, we don't know too much about this. Like I said, I'm going to, recap the press release just very, very quickly. Now, for the 2025 Shenks release, what makes it special is because some of the whiskey was finished in French oak toasted but not charred barrels. And these are crafted from wood grown in the Vosges forest. Yes, I looked up the pronunciation of that because it's not spelled like that at all. It's spelled Vosges. But the goal of it was to help accentuate the character of the rye in the whiskey. Now, another thing that makes this interesting, especially from the Michter's lineup, is this is a Kentucky sour mash whiskey, which, as a reminder, means they use a portion of the spent mash from the previous batch that was going, and they use it to start the fermentation on the next. Now, with the Shenks, we do not get an age statement here on the bottle. We just see that it's small batch. It is, 91.2 proof, so 45.6% ABV. Very little information on the bottle as well. It's more of like one of those, if it's a special release. I think the first time I had a Shenks and Bombergers was probably back in 2018, 2019. I'd have to go look on my channel, but it's been more than 5 years since I've last had one of these. So I had to, see what it's all about and see if it's worth that $110. Let's go and give the Shenks Homestead a nose. Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah, I like that a lot. I mean, I've always said that I've loved the whiskey coming out of Michter's. I think they have a very solid flavor profile that kind of is consistent across their entire lineup. Yes, they are a little pricier than some other releases, even like the standard Michter's bourbon or American whiskey. But they're one that I happily recommend to folks, especially if you're trying to get into, more higher end whiskey. I think Michter's is always a place to go. Now, do I say jump straight to Shenk's Homestead? We'll find out. We'll see if this is worth, a splurge buy if you are new to it. But yeah, on the nose, this Shinks is sweet. It's caramel. It's got a little bit of like a roasted nuttiness, I think, on the nose. And for only being 91.2 proof, I mean, that's a lot of character coming off of just the nose alone. The more I nose it, the more it goes in kind of the direction of graham cracker, but it has a bit of like a, this is a weird example, but kind of like an egg tart dessert. It kind of has that like, I don't know how you would describe it. It's not like a sour note, but it's something that kind of has that like egginess on the nose, if that makes sense. It's kind of like blending savory and sweet together. And that's a thing that I really like about a lot of bourbons. So I'm hopeful that the palate is going to be just as interesting as this nose is. So let's go and try this 2025 Legacy Series from Michter's Shenk's Homestead Sour Mash Whiskey. Cheers. Interesting. It definitely doesn't go, it's funny. I said on the nose, it doesn't have char, which like I said, it's not a charred barrel. That's what makes it unique and what makes it an American whiskey. But I see the same thing here. It's got kind of like a roasty characteristic to it, not smoky at all, not necessarily like any of those like, strong wood notes that I would get on like, let's say a bourbon. But this one just has a little bit of like you kind of are roasting some, like I said, almonds or peanuts or something in that territory. It does coat the palate, but it's with an interesting sweetness and like a little bit of like a coffee note. You can't really tell much age on this whiskey because you're not getting that element. I usually can tell, how old a bourbon is based on how much of that older oak note I'm getting. But this one, it almost feels like, I don't want to say devoid of it because that's the kind of is doing a disservice, but there's not a definite oaky backbone that I typically see in a bourbon. That's really unique. I think it is a really good whiskey. For my palate, I do look for more of those oaky, bold notes. It's not even a diss on the proof. I just think, this is definitely a lighter, more delicate whiskey than I'm typically used to drinking, especially at that price point. I don't want to sound like, a snob, but when I'm paying over $100 for a bourbon, I would like at least one, an age statement, or two, a cask strength release. I just think 110 is a bit high for this release, or it's higher than I would be willing to pay for it. But I did, and I'll enjoy it. I just don't think I enjoy it that much more than the Michter's toasted sour mash whiskey they did. When was that? Was that a couple years ago? It was like their special release. It was like the toasted barrel release. Retail on it was only like $60. I think that the second batch of it was a bit higher, but this is definitely in that realm. It's not, it doesn't feel like a special edition release in the way that I expect Shinks to be. But we'll see. Maybe it's just the Shinks. Maybe the Bomberger Declaration release this year will be the one that blows me away. So we're going to go ahead and move on to that portion of this doubleheader bite-sized review. Now, the Bomberger's Declaration from 2025 comes in at 108 proof. This one is also a small batch, but it is a Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. So once again, they use the Chinkapin barrels that they have done in previous releases, and they claim that wood science and maturation are key to the character of Bomberger's Declaration. Michter's master of maturation, Andrea Wilson, said that she's happy with the result. We used a spectrum of different barrels constructed from wood, naturally seasoned outdoors, in varying cases from 18 months to 3 years to 4 years to 5 years, thus changing the chemistry of the oak's contributions during aging. The result is a bold and multidimensional experience to savor and enjoy. Now, like the Shanks, we do not get an age statement on the whiskey itself. We're talking about just the seasoning of the casks being up to 5 years old. So we don't know. It is a straight bourbon whiskey, so we at least know the minimum age is at least 4 years old. But as with the Shanks, I'd really like to know how old this whiskey is, especially when I'm paying top dollar for it. Let's go and get the Bomberger's Declaration poured. Oh, on the nose already, I can tell that this is much more of what I'm familiar with. I was going to say it's much older, but that's just because I'm getting that oak influence that I didn't get on the Shanks. So I can't necessarily judge that because that is an American whiskey versus a bourbon. But I will say for me and my palate, I am drawn toward the nose of the Bombergers myself. It is dark, it's rich, it's got a bit of cinnamon and some baking spices. It's kind of reminding me very much of like a fall whiskey. There's almost a bit of an earthiness that kind of reminds me of like a I don't want to say a tree, like that's kind of weird, but it kind of does remind me of like the smell of autumn, like the leaves falling on the ground. Yeah, very different direction than the Shanks, and it's definitely more what I'm looking for. So, by the way, I think I mentioned this, but if I forgot, this is 108 proof versus the 91.2 proof of the Shanks. So we're jumping up quite a bit. I'll stop nosing it. Let's go ahead and give a taste to the 2025 Bomberger's Declaration. Cheers. Ooh, okay, yes. That is a really good bourbon. Oh, wow. It has almost a bit of bitterness on the back end, but like bitter in a good way, like a bitter dark chocolate. Yeah, I have a good feeling that bitter and those darker flavors are coming from that seasoning of the wood. I think drier wood tends to lead to a bit more of the bitter, darker notes. Younger wood, I think, is more of the kind of sour notes. Sometimes I get on a whiskey. I always say it has like a young wood note. That's usually what I'm referring to. It has a bit of like a tartness to it. This doesn't have that at all. It's very, very dry, very rich. And even though I said, this doesn't have an age statement, based on palate alone, I would guess there's a lot of older whiskey that went into this. Would I like them to have revealed that? Absolutely. Do they need to sell it? No. It's going to sell out no matter what. It's done it every year since I got it last time. It rarely sits on the shelves unless it's overpriced. Man, that is really good. That's right up my alley. It's that darker oak. It kind of reminds me of what I like about some Russell's Reserve picks. They kind of have some of the similar baking spices notes in there as well, combined with that older age. I think those are 9 years old, if I remember correctly. So it's definitely in that realm of flavor profile. If I had to guess, age, like I said, I would say like 8 or 9. But man, that is a fantastic bourbon. This will definitely make it into a contender for my top 10 whiskeys of the year. So if you see these two on the shelves and you can't decide between the two, and like, let's say you can only get one, even if the Shanks is a little bit cheaper, the Bombergers to me is a significantly better buy for your buck if you do like a bolder, darker, richer, oakier whiskey experience. But if you prefer the sweeter, the lighter, you don't want that much oak influence, but you want that burst of flavor, and especially at a lower proof, Shenk's Homestead is a great buy as well. I just think for me personally, I would probably skip that moving forward, and I would just get the Bombergers, because the Bombergers hits every note that I want a good bourbon to be, other than, not being that available and not having an age statement. Those are my two things that would knock it down from, if I were to give it a score, that would knock it down a bit. But yeah, both good releases for what they are. I'm curious to hear what you guys think. Have you guys had this year's release from 2025, or have you had other releases of Bombergers and Shanks? Let me know. Leave a comment on either the YouTube video of this podcast, or leave a comment on our Discord server, which, by the way, you guys can find at bourbonbytes.com. Everyone's welcome, but if you are a Byte Club member, which is our membership program, you get access to some exclusive rooms like our VIP lounge, our monthly movie night, our private tasting lounge for those at the higher tiers, and much, much more. But we'd love to have you over on bourbonbytes.com. You can find the merch, you can find the Discord, all that fun stuff there. But all right, I think that does it for this week's episode. I know it's a little bit different than my normal format, but I did want to make sure I squeezed in both of those reviews since I previously mentioned both of these on the podcast. Now that I have a chance to try them, I wanted to follow up with the review here on the podcast. So thank you for listening. Make sure to follow me again on your favorite platform. I post a new episode every Thursday. And until next time, this has been Bourbon Bytes, whiskey reviews with a gaming twist. Cheers. I'll talk to you guys next episode.